You're listening to the Radius Church podcast, recorded live each Sunday in North Hollywood, California.
You know, one of the things I love about living in this republic is religious freedom. Now, I'm an American. I don't want to assume you are, but in America, you can, for the most part, believe whatever you want to believe. So I don't want to assume you come from my religious background. You might not. You might be somebody who does not subscribe to an institutionalized religion at all. And frankly, I don't blame you. But it doesn't mean that you're not religious. You have some sort of an ism. And I don't mean like a spiritual camp you belong to or a brand or a club. An ism can just be wherever we go to tell ourselves that we're okay. Or wherever you go to logically come up with the idea that your life matters. Or to manage your guilt when you betray your values, however you define your values. An ism in its purest form is wherever we go, whatever we rely on for our enoughness. And that's a universal human need, the search for enoughness, that we are enough, that we're worth enough, that we're accomplishing enough in this life. That's a need, a search that unites us across party lines and religious spectrums and gender and race and age and economic strata. But it's not just the need, I think, that unites us. I actually think there's an ism that unites a lot of us. I almost called this series Americanism, because I realized that by virtue of being an American, I'm sort of immersed in a religion of sorts with its own doctrines and liturgies and worship and confessions. And you might not think about it that way or think about your culture that way, but we are all immersed in some sort of an environment that has its own impulses that are shaping our cognitive abilities and our sociology, I think shaping our souls. And maybe some of that's healthy. Maybe you love some of the core doctrines of that cultural ism, but to whatever degree it's destructive or holding us back or blinding us, I think I wanted to give us an opportunity to deconvert, to leave the religion of our culture for the very sake of our souls. One of Americanism's core doctrines is if you are not busy, you are not enough. And it's in our historic DNA. The Puritans broke away from the Church of England to finally get it right. And they had a really hard time separating their faith from their busyness. In fact, it would seem that they thought if you weren't struggling enough, then God would probably pass you by. And they didn't want that to happen as a brand new culture. But they also thought that if we weren't busy enough together, if we weren't striving together, if we weren't working hard enough together, the very fabric of society would fall apart. And so then you flash forward to the time we're living in now, wherein they don't just have a resume, you are your resume. We're not just raising a family, we are pushing kids to their full potential, right? In fact, as a parent, I confess, I sort of subconsciously look down on parents whose kids are not busy enough. I don't know if you get holiday letters anymore. But if you do, it seems that the way you're supposed to write a holiday letter, like a Christmas letter, an end of year, a Hanukkah letter, is to somehow communicate that you're almost too busy to write the holiday letter, right? And of course, every single day, at the flick of a thumb, we have an endless stream of comparison where we can somehow evaluate how busy, full, productive, how high impact our lives are in comparison to somebody else. And I don't know how many clinical studies and documentaries we have to watch to finally tell us that the more time we spend on social media, the more productive and therefore happier we perceive other people to be, and the less productive or accomplished and therefore sadder we feel as a result. And yet, this drives us to appear at least like we're moving further, like we're accomplishing more. In fact, it creates what many people call hustle porn. You know, where people create these streams of what appears to be impossibly full schedules, because if you're not overoccupied, you must be inferior to those who are. And the companies that provide these feeds for us, they are perfectly tuned to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to captivate your attention so that you keep feeding that beast. And over time, this starts to change your psychology, your sense of reality. It gradually changes your perception of the world and your place in it. And that deteriorates your well-being. It drives your behavior. I want us to ask ourselves why we feel like we have to keep so busy, or at least appear like we are busy or we're accomplishing something. What do we think we're going to get as a result of it? I'll tell you what I usually get. I usually get exhausted and disappointed. And I don't think that's only a challenge of our modern age. People have been lamenting that for years. In fact, there's this one ancient memoir from a highly successful, highly productive guy that reads, "So, what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless." And this is not an email from someone last Thursday. This is a memoir thousands of years old. Now, I know I just quoted the Bible, but rest assured, what I'm not going to give you today is please trade one ism for another ism. You have to just stop believing whatever you think about God and reality and become a Christian. In fact, let me just warn you that the most religious people you know are still immersed and affected by and heavily influenced by the culture in which they live. So that's not what I'm saying. But I do want to give us some space to ask ourselves, why? Why do we feel like we cannot stop? Yeah, some of you have demanding jobs. That makes sense. Some of you are raising kids. That's a demanding responsibility. Some of you are trying to homeschool and maintain a job, and you have every right to feel stretched really thin, like further than it's healthy for you to be stretched. Some of you are looking for work, and you can't let up on that because you will not get a job accidentally. But what I want to pay attention to is the unnecessary hustle that might fill in whatever few gaps you feel like you have in your life. What's that all about? That kind of filler busyness that we all have from time to time. What are we trying to prove? Who are we afraid that we're going to fail? What is driving that kind of pace? If you would say that approach or that activity is panicked or frenetic, that you have some sort of fear that drives you to not stop, well, then usually you're not running towards something that you see to be exciting or healthy or productive. When I feel panicked and afraid, it's usually because I'm running away from something. And I wonder if some of us who are trying to feel like we are enough, so we have to keep ourselves busy, are really just running away from having to deal with ourselves, or deal with our insecurity, or deal with our pain, or deal with our marriage, or deal with our self-doubt, or deal with how alone and unloved we feel. So today, to all of my type A's and my Enneagram 3s and my overachievers and my hypertense and hyperactive busy people, heck, to all of my fellow Americans and to my own soul, hear me when I say this: you can't do enough to become enough. And the attempt to do so is damaging the American soul. Now, you don't have to believe anything Jesus promised, but he did offer more than just behavior modification and schedule changes. He always tried to speak underneath what was driving our behavior. Why is it that you work so hard? Why do you have to give the impression that you're accomplishing a lot or you're living up to your potential? And he offered hope for that. Because if we can solve what's really going on underneath the surface, some of the activity that is destroying us and breaking apart our humanity might sort of naturally take care of itself. Now, there's this one moment in Jesus' teaching that a close friend and follower, Matthew, recorded for us in his biography of Jesus. And before I get into the solution to what is driving our frantic pace, I want to acknowledge that Jesus said some pretty incredible, and you might even think crazy things. In Matthew 11, verse 25, it says, at that time, when Jesus was doing some other teaching, Jesus prayed this prayer. Matthew heard it and he wrote it down. "O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, thank you for hiding these things." And this is like enlightenment. This is much bigger ideas. Hiding these things from those who think themselves wise and clever, and for revealing them to the childlike. Or another way to understand it is revealing it to people who are not trying to overcomplicate their life. Yes, Father, it pleased you to do it this way. And he goes on to say, "My Father's entrusted everything to me. No one truly knows the Son except the Father, and no one truly knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Now, if you're hesitant about following Jesus or trusting Jesus, this might be one of the reasons why, because nobody dared claim things like this. Nobody dared go this far. Jesus claimed, hear him, that you could not be closer to God than him. And that might make you nervous, and I understand why. But aside from that, what he's about to say is something I think might help us, okay? It's interesting to note what Jesus said is going to happen the closer you get to him, and by extension, the closer you'll get to God. You'd think that the closer you get to some perfect divine being, the scarier life is, or the faster you're going to have to run, or the harder you're going to have to work. But listen to what Jesus says will happen the closer that you get to the divine. Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." Now, I want to loop back and make sure that we know who gets to experience this promise. Who is Jesus talking to? This promise applies to anybody and only those who have ever felt, quote, weary and carry heavy burdens. So I think that could basically apply to anybody who is surviving through 2020. But more specifically, and in context of what Jesus is saying here, I think that this most directly applies. This hope is for those who are religiously performing. Like, you cannot stop performing and achieving and looking like you're making progress. This is the person that believes that if they stop, they will disappear or their life won't matter. But I think this hope also hits home for the person who is performing religiously. Now, some of the most performance-addicted spaces on the planet are going to be within the communities of churches. And I want to acknowledge that, because in spaces that we create, faith communities create, people are always trying to outgood each other, or at least appear like they are outgooding each other, outperforming each other. And that's why religion of any stripe could kill us, because no matter how many boxes you check and how you compare to the performance of the person next to you or the person on the other side of the screen, you never totally feel enough. You never get close to what anybody would describe as content or secure or stable. That's why it's such a distraction. And I think it's destructive for us socially, because people who achieve some level of feeling like they're good enough automatically become a little mean. And in fact, if you feel that you are good enough, that you've accomplished enough, that you stand for all of the right things, that you're performing well the way that culture demands that you need to perform, you could actually start to feel good about being mean, because you'll feel like you are in a position to tell other people how to become morally enlightened or perfect. And in any culture, whether it's within a church or within our country, any culture dominated by these outward demonstrations of piety are going to become increasingly merciless places. And I know you're feeling it. They're going to become increasingly places full of self-consciousness and fear, and it's going to become a culture in which you crucify more than you forgive. That's what that religion gets us. And in this country, at least, from our churches to our cancel culture, we are fast becoming a legalistic, do not stop moving, but make sure you don't make a false move moral state. And I want to deconvert from that. The promise, if we come to Jesus, for those who are weary and feel like you're carrying a heavy burden, is, I will give you rest. Now, you might think that I'm asking you again to trade one religion for another, but I just want you to listen to the practical way in which Jesus says you can achieve a manageable, sustainable pace for yourself and find rest. The first step that he mentions is to come to him, right? And this might be the hardest thing for some of us to wrap our heads around. The most radical idea in everything I'm sharing today is admitting that you need something other than yourself. Jesus is saying here, I want you to acknowledge that you cannot become enough or earn enough or feel like enough on your own. So he's saying, come to me. Secondly, he says, I want you to take my yoke upon you, which at first seems really weird because a yoke, what is that? It's a wooden harness that you put on the shoulders of an ox so that they can pull a burden. So it sounds like what Jesus is saying is, hey, for those who are carrying a heavy burden, I just want you to take on a different burden. But that's not what he means. What he's saying is trade the weight that you're carrying. When Jesus said that his yoke is easy, what he literally is saying in the original language is the yoke that he wants to place on your life is customized. So what is he saying? He's saying that there is good work that your life is uniquely positioned to create in the world. There is beauty that only you can accomplish in the world. There's something that God wants to give the world through you. And the more time we spend comparing ourselves to the burden or responsibility or opportunity that other people are shouldering around us, the further we postpone becoming and getting to experience who we really are. Trade the weight you're carrying to the one that is custom fit for you. But he's also saying within that, share that burden. Share the weight. He says, take my yoke. And he's not saying he's going to release it from his own shoulders. Maybe right now you're feeling the weight of the world, you're feeling the injustice, you're feeling the financial crisis, you're feeling the political division, or maybe you are just feeling the weight of your child's future. And what Jesus is saying is here is you need to constantly be trading in that instinct that you and I both have to pull all of that weight on your own and routinely let that weight be shared by bigger shoulders, specifically his. And as we do that, the third step to finding rest in the midst of this impulse to stay busy and to be productive is to let me teach you. I don't think Jesus has anything to learn from me, but I have so much to learn from him. To live a life that creates incredible work and incredible rest without having to maintain an incredible pace, I need to watch a master. I've got to learn his starts and his stops. I need to learn his reflexes for when he's strong and when he's flexible. I need to learn his yes and his no. Come to him. Share the burden that was meant for you and meant for him to accomplish in this world together, and constantly be learning from the master. And you will find rest for your weary soul. I think it's fascinating that this instruction of Jesus only appears in Matthew's biography of Jesus. That doesn't mean that Jesus didn't say what we're quoting or what he's quoted as saying here. It just means that of the 4 biographers, 3 of whom were very close friends and followers of Jesus, it's possible that this moment just had a deeper impact on Matthew as a person, as a man. Now, I don't know this at all. I'm just sort of intuiting this, but I do know a little bit of Matthew's biography. And Matthew was a tax collector, so he worked for the government, but he also was someone in a perfect position to take advantage of people. We can understand him to be sort of a despised 1%er who worked the system, who stepped over people, who was mean to people just so that he could appear more successful and accomplish more. And then Jesus. Then Jesus shows up in Matthew's life. Could not have changed more radically. And I wonder, again, I'm just intuiting this, if Matthew was working so hard before he met Jesus because he didn't want to fail his family, or because he wanted to go further than the previous generation went, or maybe he didn't know what he was worth apart from what he could earn. I don't know. I wonder how scared Matthew had to be, how panicked Matthew had to be to go as far as he justified going in his life. To work as hard and to step on as many people and to judge as many people as Matthew probably was in a position to do. What was he scared of? So imagine what it would sound like to someone who is an at all costs overachiever, fraud, to find out that he could rest, that he didn't have to work hard enough to become enough, that he could share the load of this life, that he could throw off the burden that he'd been dragging. I don't think he would have forgotten one syllable of that hope. And maybe that's why Matthew recorded it. I think God wants you and me to hear this today. He wants our cultural soul to hear this. You can't do enough to become enough. You can have more purpose in your work and in your life than proving your worth. You don't have to do that anymore. And when you don't have to prove your worth with the work that you're doing, it actually has a tendency to focus the work that you're doing to maximize the benefit it could be in the world. It gives you more freedom and more energy and more rest. Now, I believe that Americans, and maybe you who's joining us today, I don't know that we know what to do with rest, so I'm dedicating an entire episode to that next time that we're together. But for the purpose of today, we have to at least realize that we aren't worth what we do. We are worth what has already been done for us. That's the great hope and the great news. Jesus died to prove that we have nothing left to earn. We say that almost every week. And the American soul, your soul, is invited to come to Jesus and trade the burden of our cultural performance and to deconvert from frantic. Now, if you want to know what that looks like with those first steps of coming to Jesus so that your weary soul can find rest, go over to radius.la/decide. And there's much more explanation there so you can make up your own mind on your own time. But I do want to do something as I close today that we've not done yet, and maybe you don't expect to do on a screen, which is like this crying baby that always is demanding our attention. I want to create space, and maybe use this as an excuse, even though you're watching a stream right now, to pause and let me force you to just create the smallest amount of space. I want to shut up, and I'm going to choose to close my eyes and encourage you to close your eyes for about 60 seconds. And if, by the way, you've got actual crying babies and screaming children and a dog barking and you can't do it right now, hit pause on this. You can come back to this when you can create the space, but I think we need it. I'm just going to create a few seconds here, a few moments of sharing our burdens with God. Now, I don't think that it's not just more than you can handle. I think we desperately need this right now. In this silence, what do? I want you to be honest about the pace that you're keeping and why you're keeping it. I want you to be honest as you can with what you're afraid of and what you think you lack. I want you to ask God. I want you to ask His Spirit to reveal to you. You. Reveal yourself to yourself because He wants to free you. He wants to give you rest. So right now, again, I'm going to shut up, give us 60 seconds of silence right here on the feed, and then I'm going to close us. Let's do it. You know, as I was experiencing this space, this old song that I used to sing came to mind, and I don't know, maybe somebody other than me needs to hear this. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Jesus, help us remember that the greatest work has already been done on our behalf. That we are not defined, our value is not determined by what we're able to do, but by what you have done for us. That's what we're worth. May that realization drive our perspective and drive our pace. May we come to you. May we share the burden of this life with you, and may we learn from you so that we can find rest for our weary, burdened souls. In Jesus, we pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you for listening. For more information, follow us on social media at Radius Church LA and visit us on the web at radius.la.